So I want to talk about the difference between a riding lawnmower and a garden tractor. And do you really need a garden tractor for micro-homesteading? So let's start off with the riding lawnmower. This is a John Deere D130. I bought this brand new a few years ago. Kind of regret buying a brand new lawnmower, but anyway. 22 horsepower engine, 42-inch mow deck. It does a fine job of mowing the yard. It's not built to work too hard. It is not ground engaging. And by ground engaging, what I mean is it's designed by the factory to drag things through the dirt and engage the ground. And we're going to go over some of the difference between a machine that is not rated for ground engaging, one that is rated for ground engaging, and then we'll talk about what you actually need to get some work done. So let's do a brief overview of a lawn mower, and we'll talk about some of the differences. I'm going to start at the rear end. That's the business end of getting anything done in the dirt. As you can see here, it's just got a small hole just for attaching a little cart. That's about all it's really made to do. Another dead giveaway, there's no lug nuts. So it's not designed to take a lot of torque. Alright, looking at the frame. You can see by comparison here, frame is only stamped bent sheet metal, and it's about 3 inches high. They're pretty thin, 1/8 inch at the most. It's kind of light duty, not made for a whole lot other than moving you around. You can tell by these slide in. That's the frame under that little hump there, and there ain't much there. We got a good level view, pretty flat. So that's not designed to work too awful hard, but it does a fine job of mowing the lawn. Next giveaway is the vertical shaft engine. Even though this is 22 horsepower, it is a vertical shaft, which means it's belt drive, built to the accessories, built to the transmission, the transaxle. So it's not really made for high torque. Taking a next look at the front end. Front end isn't too bad on this for what it is, really. One of the big selling points of these D130, and I think most lawnmowers nowadays, is they got a cast iron front end, which is all great, fine and dandy, but it's still not super heavy duty, which is, for what it's designed to do, just fine. So all in all, this does a fine job of mowing the lawn. It's hydrostatic, nice comfy seat, and pulls a little garden trailer, a little garden cart. So next we're going to take a look at the John Deere 316, get a closer look on that, and we'll do a bit of a comparison. Alright, next we're going to do an overview here of the John Deere 316. This is basically the same thing as a 318. I haven't put it on and modified it for the steering brakes. John Deere 318 has power steering, which, unless you're going to put a loader on the front end, makes no difference whatsoever in my opinion. The gear ratio on the steering box on this thing, it feels like you have power steering unless you have a massive load on the front end. So that doesn't bother me much. The only thing I truly honestly miss, I'm missing a pedal. Just one brake, and that's it. John Deere 318, 420s, 322s, that sort of thing. Those will have a secondary brake, and that's a steering brake. So you can lock them together, operate as one brake. You can unlock it like a large tractor and have one brake for the left side and then one brake for the right side, which basically means that when you have a wheel spinning, let's say you're plowing or doing something, you got your left wheel starts spinning. Well, then it's got low traction, so what you can do is engage the left brake, and it'll slow it on that wheel, and the power will go to the right, and that'll use that to get you unstuck. And also you can use that if you got something heavy on the rear end, you don't have much for steering because your front end is light, you can actually use the brakes to steer the direction that you're going, hence steering brakes. So difference between 316 and 318, that really makes a difference. In my opinion, for this application, for what we would use it for, is the steering brakes, which I'm gonna put on here, just haven't gotten to it yet. Let's go over some of the other differences to the lawnmower. Alright, we're going to start on the rear end, just like we've done a lawnmower, and you can tell immediately it's a little bit different. This has a 3-point on, just like the big tractors. This is a Cat 0 3-point, and so it is made to work. It is made to work very hard, actually. So the 3-point will lift up and down the implements you put on there, And if you notice over here, I'll zoom in, I added rear hydros. That's not stock. That's an accessory that you can get. John Deere offered it. Aftermarkets also offer it. So the difference in the rear end is pretty dramatic. Ground engaging, this thing's made to work. Also, you can note, you can see the frame right here, and I'll try to get in on it. This right here, that's the back end of the frame. So you can already tell it's massively bigger than a lawnmower. Alright, looking at the drive wheels there, and again, big difference. You got 5 lugs and a pretty solid hub there. This is made to work. Again, made for high torque. It's not just a little shaft with a key on it. This is actual lug wheels like you'd find on a tractor or a vehicle, something that's made to put torque to the ground. So that's your next giveaway for ground engaging. Okay, we're going to take a quick view of the frame on this. You can't even see the entire frame. It's pretty well covered up. I don't have the pan off at the moment, but I might take that off at some point and I'll get a picture of it. But the frame on this thing is massive. I am not exaggerating when I tell you that the frame rivals my 3/4 ton pickup truck. It's overbuilt, but they did that on purpose. There's a whole backstory with the John Deere 317. Major flop. Had a lot of issues. A lot of people were turned away from John Deere garden tractors from the 317 flop. Anyway, they went back to the drawing board and they came up with the 318, which was incredibly overbuilt. And they did that on purpose to bring back their reputation for being heavy duty. And the 316 was just the 318's little brother without some of the bells and whistles like the power steering and steering brakes we talked about. Okay, if you see that hump right in the middle here, where you right by the seat, there's a big hump there because there's a frame there, a real heavy-duty frame. And you can tell by my hand, that's not small. That is a heavy-duty frame. So that's made to work, made to get something done. Let's look at the front end. Alright, on the front end, you're going to notice that there's a bunch of crud on the front. Those are sandbags. Got 4 of them on there, each weighing 70 pounds. The front ends on these have a built-in attachment point. They're designed to take in a variety of accessories. Not so much like the lawnmower. That lawnmower actually does have an attachment point. It is nowhere close to this heavy duty. You don't put weight on there like this. The front axle itself, it's heavier duty, although not massively overbuilt. I'd have to check, but I believe the weight specs for the front end are around 800 pounds static, which is more than ample for this. For what we use it for, but they're good stout front ends, solid cast iron. They got a bigger bearing. They got a bigger bearing up front than the lawnmower does. Lawnmower is just a bushing. That's an actual bearing and a good heavy duty front end. They'll take a lot of abuse. Alright, looking at the operator station on this, you're going to notice something else that's a little bit different. These 2 levers up here on the left, those are for the hydraulics. If you know your John Deeres, you know that the 316 does not have dual hydraulics. This one does because I put it in there. I modified it. Took the hydraulics out of a 318. I also took the coolers because might as well. And I put dual hydraulics on this because I wanted to put a 4-way blade on the front. And also that's what was needed to put the rear hydraulics on, which I have somewhat plans for, but I just like having the options. So that's one upgrade I did do to this, is the dual hydraulics, the 2-circuit hydraulics. And that's a big difference that you're not going to see on a lawnmower, is the hydraulics. They don't have them. Hydraulics are handy. Just quick under the hood, but you can't see a whole lot here. It's got an Onan 16 horsepower engine, which if you remember from the lawnmower had a 22 horsepower Briggs. This is a 16 horsepower Onan engine. This is a 1985 tractor. Even though this is only rated at 16 horsepower, this thing will grunt. And it will grunt more than that 22 horsepower modern Briggs engine. I don't know why. I don't know exactly how they're rated different, although I did rate them a bit different back in the old days. They rated them at kind of horsepower to the ground, and it was more theoretical or crank horsepower. When they're rating on the modern ones, you know, everyone's got to have the biggest engine. That's a big selling point. Another mod I did on this one was the hour meter just installed. That was an option on these 316s for some stupid reason. John Deere couldn't put a $10 hour meter in as a standard piece. So some other items of note that are different between a garden tractor and the lawnmower is just the weight of the machine. This machine is somewhere around 460 pounds, I believe, dry weight. weight. The 316 is around 850 pounds dry weight, and that's dry. That's, you know, supposed to be no fluids, no operator, nothing like that. Of course, with the 316, you're going to add some weight on as soon as you put the 3-point on. You're going to add some weight on. I loaded the tires. I did another video on that. I'll put a link in the description. So the tires added about 60-some pounds each side, but you need the weight. The weight is actually critical, but there's a balance there. You need enough weight to have enough traction to pull through the ground, to pull the plow. You try to pull anything with this, even though there's the horsepower to do it, you're just going to spin tires. I don't care what kind of tires you put on there. That little bit of weight, you're not going to move. There's just no way possible. You're not going to be able to pull anything through the ground like a plow. Not going to happen. Whereas you need the weight, you know, just based on what I've found with the 316, you need a tractor where its dry weight is at least 800 pounds, and I mean minimum. You're going to have to add weight from that, but right around 1,000-pound tractor to be able to scratch and claw on the soil. Now, if you got a real sandy soil, that'll be a little less. If you're trying to go through rocks and hard clay, we got a heavier clay soil here. But if you're trying to go through something that's very, very hard, you might need a little bit more. So that's one distinction. There are some other classes of garden tractors that are a little smaller than the 316 but bigger than the 130 type lawnmower. They're going to have what's called a sleeve hitch. A sleeve hitch is, it's not a 3-point. The 3-point has 3 points. You can adjust more. You can adjust the side to side. You can adjust the angle. So let's get more adjustments in there. A sleeve hitch, and I'll try to get a link or a description or throw a photo in here so you can see what I'm talking about. It's a simple bar that goes on the back and it goes up and down. And a lot of times they're even manual. You got a stupid little lever that comes up over the side. You got a heave hoe. Skip it. If you're going out to buy a machine, skip it. If it does not have a 3-point as a factory option, you don't have to get a factory 3-point or a brand new one, but if that wasn't a factory option as a 3-point, don't buy the machine. So going back to what do you actually need? Well, it depends on how much you're willing to do by hand and what you're trying to accomplish, what you have already on hand, and how much work you're willing to do manually. It's a big one. So just say work in the garden, work and trying to grow those types of garden crops. You can use the pull-behind rototillers behind a lawnmower. I've done it before. It works just fine. All this is doing is pulling and sometimes stopping, depending if you're forward or reverse tying on the rototiller. If it's a reverse tying, you got to drag it forward, but that's not really hard to do. It just goes slow. So it's capable of doing it. You can just putz along. You don't need a lot of weight. Don't need a lot of traction to pull a rototiller, a pull-behind rototiller with one of these. But I will not use a rototiller on my soil anymore. I did before when we were kind of just getting going, just because my father-in-law brought over his tiller. That's what he used, so that's what I used to break the ground. I got another tiller for free out of a junkyard. That worked for a while. I even got a pull-behind tiller I threw out of the junkyard, rebuilt the engine, and modified it a little bit to make it a reverse tying tiller, and that was a disaster. But the problem with tilling is, with a rototiller, is you pulverize your soil. You are destroying your soil structure, and you are absolutely pulverizing it. And the more you go over it to make that nice fluffy soil that everybody likes so much, you're pulverizing it. You're taking basically the particles of soil, instead of small clumps, you're just making smaller, so they pack more densely when you do walk over it. So I won't do it. You're also creating a hard pan. It's just, tilling your soil is not good no matter how you look at it. Tilling your soil with a rotary tiller is devastating to your soil. Not to mention, if you're going to go out and buy a pull-behind rotary tiller, they're $1,500 brand new that'll go behind something like this. $1,500 brand new, and they bring good money used. So consider that. I paid $1,000 for this 316. I did have to put on a $500 3-point, and I put on $250 worth of actual rubber. I put on regular agricultural type tires. It had turf tires on there, which you'll commonly get. So I did have to put a little bit more money into this, and then, I had to buy the equipment, make what I got to make. I bought the Brindley plow, so that was just a buyout, making my harrows, that sort of thing. So it's a bit more money, but number one, it's way better for the soil. You are simply turning the soil and then breaking up the top. Any tillage on soil is damage to it, but you're not completely destroying it, and you're not pulverizing it. So that's a key thing. is you don't want to pulverize your soil. Now, if you already have a lawnmower, if you already have a tiller or access to one, I'm not telling you it's a great idea because I don't like rotary tilling on soil, but it will get you going, especially if you want to play with it, play with the larger gardens, play with that kind of work before you drop the kind of money into something like this. So, is a garden tractor necessary for in the garden? No, but I will tell you what saves a massive amount of time is the weeding. And I've linked to it before, I've talked about it on my website, is using the false seed bed technique or the stale seed bed technique. So basically where you're getting your garden, you get it all plowed, you get it all ready to plant, and then you don't do anything. And you're just cultivating for a few weeks. You let the weeds grow up for a week, they throw out their, basically the plant is either monocots or dicots. They throw up their first little leaves, cultivate it down, kill them off. As at that point you want to kill them and you want to sterilize your seed bed. And it's a lot easier to do with a cultivator behind the 316. It takes me probably longer to hook up to the equipment and get everything adjusted than it actually does to cultivate. Whereas with this, you don't want to rotary till again to kill the weeds, because now you're bringing new seeds up to the top of the soil where they can germinate, so you want to avoid that. So you have to do it by hand. You can use a two-wheel hoe, one-wheel hoe, and go along, do it that way, do it the hard way. It's only, 3-4 weeks, sometimes 2 weeks, depending on weather. Weather's huge. Soil temperature is huge. So that's where this is absolutely wonderful. It's not necessary by any means, but it makes it easier. And we all have jobs to do. Very few of us can actually do this and have zero income. I don't know if you already are sitting on money or whatever, but we've all got other things to do. So time is precious, so we got to also try to minimize time. So if you use this to till up your soil, you're going to have to weed by hand completely. There's going to be no easy way around that. You might be able to rig up a tiny little cultivator to pull behind this thing. Be careful, especially on a lawnmower, you're going to break something. So you just want to be very careful of how much you're trying to work these lawnmowers, because they're not made to do much. But as far as other things around the homestead, other things around our micro farm here, is where I've come to the 316 being absolutely invaluable is material handling. You're always moving stuff. You're always needing to lift stuff, carry stuff, move stuff from here to there. It's a never-ending process, and I built a set of forks that go on the 3-point on this, and they live on there. They are always on there. I use it constant. I use this thing almost every day. I've palletized as much as I can. So I have all my fence posts on pallets. I have supplies on pallets. I have mulch, bagged mulch on pallets. You just go up, grab the pallet, bring it to your workspace, do your work, put it back. It's revolutionized having to move stuff around. Option B is use this in a cart, manually load, manually unload. It's doable. Yes, it's doable, but it's definitely not ideal. So that's something where, is the 316 required? No. And I've gotten by without it. But it has made life tremendously easier, and it's allowed me to scale up. Without proper equipment, you have to do things more manually, and that takes time. There is no two ways around it. You either upgrade your equipment, or you do things more manually. Just look back to how we, as a human race, used to have to do crops 200, 300, 400, 500, 600 years ago or more. It's hand tools, it's slow, it's back-breaking work, and if you can mechanize properly, you can reduce a lot of that workload. So, really it gets down to how much do you want to work, what do you have already. One thing you want to be careful of actually though is too big a tractor in your garden. You don't want too much weight in there, and that's something that I've tried to explain to people over and over. Some people get it, some people don't. As the bigger the tractor you have, the more compact that you make the soil, the deeper you have to plow. To break up that compaction, the deeper you plow, the bigger tractor you need. So it's a never-ending cycle. And the more you work these big equipment over a garden, you're compacting it, and it makes everything harder. One section that I now plow up for a garden, I hadn't considered doing that before, and I was running a skid steer back and forth on it, working on one project, putting in our root cellar. It's to this day, years later, it's what, 3 or 4 years later, and it's still extremely hard right there. I have to put on my middle buster and work that soil hard. It's a hard pull. I'm still paying for it, running a skid steer, and that doesn't weigh as much as a full-size tractor. Say like a 40-20 tractor. Way too big. Even a 2010 type tractor, John Deere 2010. that's going to be too big. The biggest I would even consider, you know, you get maybe a John Deere M, John Deere B in there, although that's getting to be more of a toy. In my opinion, these are more productive in a garden. I would not want much bigger. If you're going to look at a modern subcompact utility tractor, garden tractor type, what would be absolutely ideal for a garden? Honestly, John Deere 1 Series, 1025R type series, even their 2025Rs, when you start looking at them, they're not a lot more money, but more weight. And you don't want too much weight. In my opinion, you want enough to get the job done. And you only got to plow with this thing in my moldboard plow. You only need to go 3.5 inches deep, maybe 4 inches deep. You don't have to get down real deep. You just don't. There's not a need for that. Every now and again, if if it's gotten hard, throw on the middle buster, break up the hard pan if there is one, and dig a little deeper. So when you start to find yourself expanding and growing your homestead and growing your operation, you will want one of these. You're going to want an actual garden tractor. So when you're shopping for one, making sure you're going over the points we discussed. Biggest number one, what was it designed from the factory to have as far as accessories? If there is not a 3-point, not a sleeve hitch, but if there's not a 3-point available from the factory, not saying you have to buy a factory one, but if it wasn't available, skip it. Don't even bother, just skip it. Manual or automatic transmission, would you want gears? You want hydro? Dealer's choice. It doesn't matter a whole lot. Gears are somewhat nice when you're actually plowing the garden, but hydro's nice for everything else that I can possibly think of. The only time I can think of gears is better is if you're actually plowing, and then maybe. Hydros, you're going to want hydraulics. 2 circuits, great. 1 circuit will get you by. Especially if you're just planning on working in the garden and your 3-point work, 1 circuit is going to be fine. So that's some of the things you want to be shopping for. You got your John Deere 316s. Now there are some of the older Cub Cadet tractors that are made by IH. They have sleeve hitches. I believe some of them have 3 points, but I'm not a Cub expert. Be careful on those. A lot of them are the mid-range. They're not really just a cheap lawnmower, but they're not a full-fledged garden tractor either. A lot of them have the sleeve hitches. Some of them are very, very capable of plowing, which is what you want to be able to do. If you can't plow with it, you need something a little bit better. So just watch your model. You know, there's forums online, I'm sure, for those, and just look at what it's originally rated for, but then look at the weight as well. Like I said, it depends on your soil a bit, but you want to be looking at 900 to 1,000 pounds of tractor weight, not including the operator and implements, accessories on there, but the tractor itself, between 900 to 1,000 is what you want to be looking in there around. So there and again, if you're looking to just play around with what you already got, you got one of these. Like I say, you got someone with the rotary tiller, go for it if you want to. But do you need a garden tractor for micro-homesteading? The answer is no if you're willing to work harder. That's just all there is to it. They're nice, they're great. I wouldn't trade it for anything. If I had to choose between one or the other, I'll take my 316 any day of the week and twice on Sunday. But it's not 100% necessary. So, choice is yours. Those are some of the options, a bit overview of the 2 different classes. There's more out there. Be sure to research every dollar you spend. That's what we've done, and it saved us a lot of money over the years over making purchases that are a bit of a mistake. So you want to research your money before you spend it. Try to get as much information as you can. Make an educated purchase. And for me, it was the 316 was a much better buy than anything out there I could have found.